I didn't expect my life to break on a Tuesday, not after 5 years of building someone else's dream brick by brick. Not after landing the contract that made my boss a millionaire overnight. But there I was, holding a cardboard box at 11 at night, while the man I'd trusted said the one sentence that made my ears ring: "I don't need you anymore. I'm rich now." And the worst part? He meant every word. I should have seen it coming, but loyalty makes you blind in stupid, quiet ways. When I joined Westbridge Construction, it wasn't glamorous. Just a cramped office above a hardware store, 2 project managers, a foreman who smelled like diesel and cigarettes, and a boss who swore he wanted to build a family, not a company. I was 28, hungry and good at organizing chaos. He liked that, said I was the brakes he never knew he needed. I laughed the first time he said it. I didn't know he'd eventually cut the lines. Back then, our biggest jobs were kitchen remodels and small commercial repairs. Nothing pretty, nothing impressive, but work is work. I handled the calls no one else wanted. The angry clients, the nitpicky inspectors, the subcontractors who vanished for days. I didn't complain. I told myself that's how you grow. You pay your dues. You show you can hold the weight. The first red flag should have been the jokes. The ones he delivered laughing. Too loud and too easily, like he was testing how far he could push. Employees are replaceable. Clients aren't. Careful, or I'll promote you to unpaid intern. Don't get too comfortable. I might sell this place and retire on the beach. Everyone chuckled. I did too. It's incredible how many insults get dismissed when your paycheck depends on pretending you didn't hear them. By year 3, we'd somehow punched above our weight. A major logistics company put out a bid for a full renovation of their regional hub, a multi-million-dollar project. Everyone said we were wasting our time by even applying. But I stayed late for weeks, reworking numbers, tightening schedules, rewriting the pitch deck so many times I still remember some slides by heart. I didn't do it for him. I did it because I wanted to prove we weren't. A small company pretending to be big. We were capable. We just needed one chance. We got it. The day the contract was signed, he hugged me so hard I nearly lost my balance. "You're the reason for this," he said, gripping my shoulders. "You keep this pace up, and we're going to share a very big future." I believed him. God help me, I actually believed him. The project nearly fell apart 12 times in the first month. Wrong materials delivered, permits delayed, a supplier bankruptcy we didn't see coming. And every time something went wrong, everyone looked at me. I stopped sleeping, started drinking more coffee than water, learned to recognize the sound of incoming emails by vibration alone. But I kept the damn thing alive. When the biggest scheduling disaster hit, a steel delivery error that could have cost us the whole contract, I caught the mistake at midnight, called every person I needed to, and managed to reroute the entire supply chain within 6 hours. I remember sitting on the warehouse floor at dawn, shaking from adrenaline, thinking, if I quit today, no one would blame me. I didn't quit. 6 months later, the client signed off on the final walkthrough. No penalties, no delays. Full bonus paid. That bonus was the biggest check in company history. A life-changing sum for my boss. Life-improving for the rest of us. At least that's what I assumed. We had a celebration that night. Cheap champagne, cheap music, and cheap promises. He walked around the office like a king, repeating, "We did it. We did it." But every time he said we, he meant me. And every time he said did, he meant earned. I kept working at my desk while the others toasted. I still had reports to finalize. That's what responsibility looks like. You work while everyone else drinks. I was printing the final file when his voice came from the doorway. "Come to my office. Door's open." He sounded calm, almost gentle. I thought maybe he wanted to talk about next steps, new positions, maybe even a raise, something that matched the effort I'd poured into this place, something that made the sleepless nights worth it. I walked in. He was leaning back in his chair, hands behind his head, grinning like someone who just won the lottery. Maybe he actually felt like he had. "Close the door," he said. I did. On his desk lay an envelope, thick, white, sealed, my name on it. "Let's keep this simple," he said. "I'm restructuring the company. I made enough off this contract to simplify things. I don't need a full staff anymore." He pushed the envelope toward me with 2 fingers. "You're out." I thought he was joking. "Truly?" I asked. "What?" Like a man who's been slapped and is still trying to understand the shape of the hand. He didn't blink. "You heard me. I don't need you anymore. I'm rich now." Rich now. 2 words that rewrote 5 years of work in 10 seconds. I picked up the envelope. Inside were termination papers, a laughable severance, and a generic NDA. My access was already revoked. My projects reassigned. My name removed from the shared drives. I remember staring at him, waiting for the punchline, for anything that made this something other than betrayal. But he just smiled, tapped his phone twice, and said, "Security will lock up after you leave." That was it. No thank you. No handshake. No shame. I boxed my things in silence, a mug, a plant, a notebook, the pens I liked. I walked past the empty desks, past the celebration mess, past every hour I'd ever given that company, and stepped outside. The air felt colder than it should have been. I stood in the parking lot with the box in my arms, and for the first time all year, I had nowhere to be. I told myself it was just shock, that tomorrow he'd realize this was insane. But I didn't know it yet. That night wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything that would come after. The next morning felt like waking up after surgery. Everything was technically still there, but nothing responded the way it used to. I don't know how long I sat at my kitchen table staring at that envelope. The same envelope I'd slipped into my bag on autopilot, like it was just another document to file. I emptied it out slowly, piece by piece, as if there might be a hidden page that said this was all a misunderstanding. There wasn't. Termination due to restructuring. A severance that covered maybe 6 weeks of rent, if I pretended food and electricity were optional. An NDA that basically said I couldn't say anything negative about the company to anyone if I wanted to keep that tiny payout. No mention of the bonus, no recognition, not even a generic, "We appreciate your service." 5 years summed up in 4 paragraphs and a signature line. I ran the numbers like I would for a job, fixed costs, variable costs, time to failure, rent, utilities, health insurance, the small loan I'd taken to help my mom with her medical bills last year. My savings suddenly looked microscopic, like a puddle in a drought. Reality didn't come as a scream. It came as a simple math problem with the wrong answer. My phone lit up around 9. First were the messages from coworkers. "Man, I just heard. Are you okay?" I thought this was a joke. Please tell me it's a joke. And then from one guy I'd mentored for years. "He offered me your role this morning. Said you were burned out. I don't even know what to say." I answered him, "Take the promotion. This isn't on you." It was the last time we talked that week. I showered, put on a clean shirt out of habit, and opened my laptop to update my resume. That felt like betrayal too, somehow. My professional life for the last 5 years was a list of things I'd done for him. Now I had to turn it into a story about me. By noon I was on the job boards. Everyone wanted a dynamic team player with resilience and flexibility. I wanted a boring boss and honest numbers. No one was advertising that. The first interview came 2 days later, faster than I expected. A mid-sized firm across town, same field. The hiring manager smiled too much and kept glancing at her notes. "So you were let go after what looks like your most successful project?" she asked, pen hovering. "Why do you think that is? Because my boss cashed in and then cut the rope? Because loyalty doesn't show up on spreadsheets? Because he thinks rich means never saying thank you?" "It was a restructuring decision," I said instead. "My position was eliminated." She nodded slowly, like she didn't quite buy it, but also didn't care enough to dig. I walked out, knowing I wouldn't get a call back. I was right. The days blurred together. Applications, canned rejection emails, radio silence. My calendar, once blocked in color-coded chaos, was suddenly white and empty. I found myself opening our old shared drive out of muscle memory, forgetting I no longer had access. The login error stung more than it should have. I wasn't angry yet. Anger takes energy. At that point, I was mostly hollow and tired, like all the adrenaline from the last year had finally submitted its notice too. 3 days after the firing, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I said, expecting a recruiter or a spam call. "Grant? It's Lucas from Northline Logistics." Northline. The big client. The contract I'd practically bled for. I sat up straighter without meaning to. "Hey, Lucas, everything okay?" There was a pause, paper shuffling on his end. "We called the office yesterday to confirm a few schedule changes. Your boss told us you were no longer with the company. No warning, no introduction to a replacement. Just, he's gone." I could picture exactly how he'd said it too. Dismissive, like deleting a file. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I was let go last week." "May I ask why?" Lucas asked. His tone wasn't casual curiosity, it was controlled irritation. I picked my words like I was walking through a field of glass. "He said he was restructuring, that's all I was told." Lucas exhaled, an annoyed, disbelieving sound. "You were our point of contact on everything. You know that, right?" "I had that impression," I said. "For the record," he went on, "we've been very clear on our end that the reason that project worked was you. Your boss is fine in a room, but when things went sideways, you fixed them. We expected, at the very least, to meet whoever would be taking over. Instead, he shrugged and said he'd personally handle things from now on." Of course he did. The man who once said he hated meetings would now be in all of them, because there was more money on the table. "I'm sorry you were blindsided," I told Lucas, and I meant it. I didn't have any warning either. There was another pause. "Are you going somewhere else yet?" he asked. "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm figuring things out." He hummed thoughtfully. "Look, I don't want to put you in a weird position, but this isn't sitting right with us. We commit to people, not just logos. You gave us dates, we got dates. You promised updates, we got them. He promised transparency, and we got, well, whatever he thinks this is." I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear. For the first time since I left the office with that box, I felt something warm cut through the numbness. A small, sharp satisfaction. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me I hadn't dreamed those years of work. Someone had noticed. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him quietly. "We've got an internal review meeting next week," Lucas said. "Contract renewal, expansion, all that. I want to be very honest about how this affects our trust. Off the record, would you be open to grabbing coffee before then? Just to talk. Get your perspective." "You're still the client," I said. "I don't want to cross any lines." "You're a free agent," he countered. "You don't owe him silence. And I'm not asking you to trash anyone. I just want the truth." I thought about the NDA sitting on my table, the one that promised a little cash if I kept my mouth shut and my spine out of the conversation. The same NDA he'd slid across the desk like a tip. "I haven't signed anything yet," I said. "Coffee sounds fine." We picked a time and place, a neutral cafe near his office. He thanked me again before hanging up. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at the blank wall across from me. My reflection in the dark TV looked tired, but something in my expression had shifted. The helplessness had a crack in it now. For months, I'd carried that company on my back, thinking if I'd just worked hard enough, I'd secure my spot. He'd proven how wrong I was in a single sentence. Now, the biggest client he'd ever landed was asking me for clarity. That night, I went through the envelope again. This time, I placed the NDA at the very bottom of the stack and left it unsigned. He'd bought my time for 5 years. He didn't get to buy my silence with a number smaller than the bonus he'd spent on a new truck. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny decision to not pick up his pen for him was the first brick in the road that was about to cost him everything he thought he'd secured. The cafe was one of those quiet places tucked behind an office strip, too bland to be trendy, too clean to be forgotten. When I walked in, Lucas was already at a corner table, jacket off, a folder beside his coffee. He stood when he saw me, shook my hand like we were meeting for a performance neither of us rehearsed for. "I appreciate you coming," he said. "I'm not here to drag you into politics. I just want clarity." "Then you'll get it," I told him. I meant it. We sat. He didn't waste time. "Your boss claims the transition was smooth," he began, "but nothing on our end has been smooth. Communication is slower. Documents are disorganized. Questions go unanswered. It took 3 days to get a layout change approved that usually takes you an hour." "That doesn't surprise me," I said, "but I can't speak for him now." "You don't have to," he said, tapping the folder. "I have the data." He slid a printed sheet toward me. Missed deadlines, incomplete reports, inconsistent measurements. My handwriting wasn't on any of it. His was. "I told my team you were carrying that project," Lucas continued. "You were the reason we didn't pull the plug last spring." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He leaned back, assessing me with a calmness that felt more dangerous than anger. "Let me be direct. Our company is reviewing every partnership this quarter. If we renew with Westbridge, it'll be the largest contract they've ever held. If we don't, it'll be the largest they've ever lost." I nodded once. Facts were facts. "I'm not asking you to sabotage anyone," he said, "but I need to understand what happened. Why would he fire the one person keeping his company functional?" "Because he thought money would do the work for him," I answered quietly, "and because he didn't want anyone around who could prove he wasn't the genius he believes himself to be." Lucas stared at me for several seconds. "That lines up," he said finally. "Then, we're exploring alternatives. One of those alternatives is bringing in an outside firm to manage the next phase. There's one company that's been trying to get a foot in the door for years. They're competent, but they lack someone who understands our operations the way you did." I felt my pulse shift, not accelerate. Shift. "Are you asking if I'd join them?" I said. "I'm asking," he replied, "if you'd be open to working with us again. Through another firm, through a new structure, whatever keeps things clean. If we move forward, we want someone we trust running point." Trust. A word I hadn't heard sincerely in months. I thought of the NDA, the severance, the box I'd carried out of the building. I didn't owe my former boss anything. Not loyalty, not silence, not protection. "I'm open to it," I said, "but I'm not interested in revenge. If we do this, we do it professionally. No back-channeling, no blindsiding, no games." "I wasn't expecting anything else from you," he said. "Frankly, that's why we want you." We talked specifics for another hour. Not plotting, structuring, requirements, timelines, procurement protocols. My piece was simple. If I joined the new firm, I'd guide the transition strictly within standard bidding procedures. There'd be no shortcuts. When we stood to leave, Lucas shook my hand again. "He thought firing you solved his problems," he said, "but he just removed the only person who shielded him from the consequences." On the drive home, something settled inside me. Not excitement, not relief, alignment. My life wasn't being rebuilt. It was being corrected. 2 days later, I met with the competing firm, Ridgway Contracting. Their director was a pragmatic woman named Delaney, who didn't bother flattering me. "We've been trying to get into Northline for 4 years," she said. "You're not a golden ticket. You're a translator. You know their rhythm. We need that." "Then we're on the same page," I said, "because I'm not a trophy hire." "We don't do trophies," she replied. "Just results." I accepted the offer by the end of the week. The salary wasn't extravagant, but it was fair. The environment wasn't glamorous, but it was competent. There were no speeches about family, just clear expectations and actual structure. For the first time in months, I slept 8 hours without waking up to phantom notification sounds. The Northline review meeting happened the following Tuesday. I wasn't invited, obviously. I didn't need to be. The numbers were already written. A contract is a living organism, and Westbridge had let theirs rot the moment I walked out the door with my box. By Friday, rumors hit the industry like cracks in drywall. Someone from my old office texted me late at night. "Client's pulling the contract. Boss is losing it." I stared at the message in the dark, the room quiet except for the hum of my refrigerator. I didn't smile. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like gravity doing what it always does, correcting imbalance. The next confirmation came from Lucas. "Official notice sent," he wrote. "We're transitioning management. Expect the formal paperwork next week. Delaney already has the preliminary docs." I wrote back, "I'll be ready." That weekend, my former boss called me from an unknown number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice tight, scrambling for composure. "Grant, hey, it's me. Look, I think we should talk. I think there's been miscommunication. We have mutual connections. I'd like to clarify some things. Call me back when you can." I didn't. The next day he tried again, this time more frantic. "I know you've been meeting with people. I don't appreciate being blindsided. You owe me a conversation." But I didn't owe him anything. He'd made that clear when he looked at me and said he didn't need me. I simply agreed. The following week, the previous contract expired officially. Westbridge wasn't invited to rebid. The new contract, larger, cleaner, better structured, went to Ridgway, with me as the lead. When the announcement went public, my phone buzzed with messages from old coworkers, some angry, some confused, some apologetic. One wrote, "I didn't know you weren't the problem. No one ever does until the problem is gone." A month into my new role, Ridgway onboarded 3 people from my old office who'd quietly quit. They told stories I already suspected. Missed deadlines, temper tantrums, threats about pay, constant complaints about losing that damn employee who used to handle everything. I never asked for details. I didn't need them. Chaos reveals itself without help. One night, after a long day of steady normal work, the kind of work that doesn't drain the soul, I walked past a bar downtown and saw my old boss inside through the window. He wasn't celebrating. He was hunched over a laptop, talking to someone with that frantic hand-waving he did when cornered. Papers spread across the table, a stack of envelopes, too many receipts for one person. He didn't see me. I didn't stop walking. He had fired the only person keeping his world from collapsing inward, and now the collapse was simply following physics. I headed home in the cool evening air, listening to the quiet steps on the pavement. For the first time since that night in his office, I felt the weight lift, not suddenly, but like something unhooking itself from my ribs. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I had simply stepped out of the rubble before it fell. The strange thing about getting your life back is realizing how small the pieces were that you'd been missing. Not dramatic pieces. Not the kind people post inspirational quotes about. I'm talking about the tiny, invisible details you forget to notice when you're constantly bracing for the next crisis. The quiet hum of a morning that belongs to you. The way your shoulders drop when you sit down to work, not because you're exhausted, but because you're not fighting anything anymore. The fact that coffee tastes different when you're not drinking it as fuel for panic. 3 months into the new job, my days finally started to feel like a rhythm instead of a survival drill. Ridgway wasn't a perfect company, no place is, but it was stable in a way I had forgotten stability could exist. Problems came in manageable sizes. Delaney trusted me without hovering. My team actually did their jobs because they cared about doing them well, not because they were terrified of being singled out in a meeting. The North Line project, the one that had nearly killed me under my old boss, ran smoother than any large-scale operation I'd ever touched. They had better internal infrastructure, clear expectations, and most importantly, a leadership team that didn't turn every hiccup into a personal referendum on loyalty. I communicated directly with their operations manager, with weekly updates and quarterly reviews, none of which ended in shouting or last-minute emergencies. I'd never known that kind of work could be quiet, but the real shift came from the people around me. One by one, familiar names showed up in my inbox. Not dramatic confessions, just steady drip-drip messages from former coworkers who'd finally had enough. Hey, are you hiring? Do you know if Ridgeway needs an estimator? Is there project coordinator work available? I'm ready to leave. I should have left when you did. Some left before their breaking points. Some left after. Some left because they realized the person who had held everything together had never been the problem he had. I helped where I could, recommended people whose work I trusted, passed along resumes to the right departments, made introductions without turning them into favors. I didn't hold grudges, but I didn't rewrite history either. If someone had stabbed me in the back to get promoted into my old job, I didn't pretend we were friends now. But most weren't like that. Most were just people who stayed too long in a place that punished competence. 2 of them eventually joined Ridgeway directly under my division. Watching them breathe again, for real, deep breaths that don't carry fear, was a kind of closure I didn't expect. The industry gossip spread slowly, like heat through concrete. I never asked for updates, but people offered them anyway. Your old boss just lost another client. He's downsizing the office. He's selling the truck he bought with that bonus. Payroll checks bounced last month. He snapped at a vendor on a call and they dropped him. He's not doing great. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't need to. Certain things don't require applause. They just require gravity to do its job. I had stepped away from a burning building and he'd stayed inside, insisting it wasn't his fault the flames got higher. Once, at a trade convention, I saw him across the venue. He looked older, not in the way time ages you, but in the way consequence does, like something had gnawed at him for months, and he'd tried to pretend the teeth marks were decorative. He saw me, too. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, I understood something simple. He didn't hate me. He feared me. He feared the version of me that existed outside his control, the one who had finally stopped absorbing the impact for him, the one who didn't need his approval, his paycheck, or his permission to succeed. He didn't approach me. I didn't approach him. We didn't need to. There was nothing left between us but the echo of a sentence he'd said on the night he kicked me out. I don't need you anymore. I'm rich now. Rich is a temporary condition when it rests on borrowed competence. By winter, Ridgeway promoted me officially to lead project manager for their entire industrial division. It wasn't glamorous. It was 90% logistics and 10% explaining things to people who'd never set foot on a site. But it was honest work. Work where you could see the results in steel and concrete instead of in someone's ego. I bought a small house on the edge of town. Nothing extravagant. 1 floor, a backyard, a porch with just enough space for a chair and a cup of coffee. I liked the silence, the kind that isn't heavy but full, the kind you earn. Sometimes in the evenings I'd sit on the porch and watch the sky dim, not thinking, just existing. It was the first time in years I'd learned how to simply be in a moment without anticipating the next blow. I started dating again, slowly. Nothing rushed, no rebound narratives, just conversations with people who asked questions because they wanted answers, not leverage. I didn't need a relationship to feel like I had direction, but it was nice not to feel like every interaction was another audition. One Saturday, I ran into one of my former coworkers, Mark, the foreman who used to shoulder half the fieldwork with me. He looked lighter, happier. You know, he said, the place fell apart after you left. Wasn't just Northline. Everything cracked. I'm sorry it got bad for you guys, I told him. He shook his head. You shouldn't be. You did your job. He didn't do his. We talked for a while. He caught me up on who left, who stayed, who finally confronted the boss about years of pressure that made no sense outside his own head. Mark mentioned something quietly then, almost as an afterthought. He told someone once that firing you was the biggest mistake he made, not because he missed you, because it showed everyone exactly who he was. I didn't react, not outwardly, but inside, something clicked gently into place. Not triumph, not vindication, just confirmation that I hadn't imagined the weight I'd carried. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. The house was still. The air smelled like coffee and cut grass. I made breakfast at my own pace, answered a few emails, cleaned the kitchen, opened the windows. It wasn't a dramatic life. It wasn't meant to be. It was mine. Years from now, no one will care about the logistics contract that started all of this, or the bonus that changed hands, or the night I walked out with a box and 5 years of my life folded inside it. People forget numbers. People forget deals. But I won't forget the moment I learned the difference between being useful and being valued, between being tolerated and being respected, between being an employee and being a partner. And I won't forget the night he told me, smiling like he'd won something, "I don't need you anymore. I'm rich now." Because he was right about one thing. He didn't need me. But the life I have now, the work, the peace, the space to breathe, he didn't build a single piece of it. He just stepped aside and let me finally start building something for myself. That's the part he never understood. Rich isn't what you buy. Rich is what you don't have to tolerate anymore.